Right, a very warm good morning to all of you, and I'm so heartened to see such a packed, full hall. Thank you, Sunbeam School, for inviting me. I landed here last evening, and already I think my experiences has been so full and enriching. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, as you said, Fatima. Yeah, we are talking about mental health today. Mental health in children and adolescents, and look at the relevance of it in today's day, right? So I come from an organization called Children First, and we've been in existence since the last 14 years. And very early in our journey, as we grew as a team, we realized that as mental health professionals, if we sat in our clinics and waited for children to come to us, it's not really going to work, right? We'll see only the tip of the iceberg, and we probably would have neglected so many others who are out there in the community. So very early, we started going out into the community, right? We went to schools, to colleges, to NGOs, to other fellow professionals to talk about mental health, to build awareness and all of that. And over the last 14 years, we've therefore gathered experience of working with more than 100 schools in Delhi, NCR, around the country. And a lot of what I'm going to discuss today is our understanding, our insights from those experiences, right? So I'll start with a simple question, yeah? Like children ask questions. Perhaps we'll ask a question about children. So what are children naturally driven to do? Yeah, play. Anything else?
Explore.
Curiosity, nature, explore, absolutely, great, fantastic. Anything else? Question? Curiosity, yes indeed. Ask a lot of questions, yes? Enjoy, absolutely. Have fun, yeah? So yeah, children want to play, they're naturally driven to play, laugh, make a lot of noise. Children often do, isn't it, yeah? Move. Children often do not want to actually sit still, they want to move, right, yeah? Have fun, explore, all of these things that you just mentioned, ask questions. They're very curious. By nature, children are curious, isn't it, yeah? They imagine and they create, and that also comes very naturally to them, much more than it does to adults actually. Yeah, and they take chances, because without taking chances, it's difficult to learn things. You have to, even a toddler, when he gets up and starts walking and is not very steady, she's taking a chance because she might fall, right? Or when a young a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old goes to school and is trying to make their first friend, they're taking a chance. Because who knows, that friend might, that other child might turn away or be rude. But they'll take that chance to be able to make that friend, isn't it? So anything they do, they learn, they have to take chances. Yeah? So all of these things happen, the learning happens, but at their own pace. That's, if you leave them to it, that's what they will do. Learn at their own pace, isn't it? Yeah? But what do we expect children to do? What do we expect them to do? Yeah. We want them to pay attention, read, listen, speak only when asked. Yeah? Comprehend, memorize, write, spell, calculate, solve problems, reason out, stay respectful and obedient, be responsible, awareness of time and surrounding, eat well, sleep on time, take care of their things, and participate and excel in sports and extracurricular activities. All of that. And fast. Don't waste time, hurry up. A lot of what children do as they naturally do, is in our eyes wasting time. Don't you think, yeah? And when these expectations come about, what is the impact? What does such expectations do to our children? Okay?
Irritation.
Withdraw. Yeah? They withdraw. Yeah. With their self-esteem, indeed. So there is a lot of complex impact it can have. I'm not by this suggesting that we stop expecting children, or from children to do things, to learn things, etc. Because by doing that, we are also, in a way, validating their capabilities. If you're saying, I expect you to do well, we're also validating it. But the question is that, what do you expect of which child and at what time in their lives, right? When you ask or anything of them, when we are expecting anything of them, are we setting them up to fail, or are we setting them up to succeed? And if we are setting them up to fail, if they are not living up to your expectations, this is what happens. They disconnect. Yeah? And when they disconnect, they can do so with anxiety and fear. Yeah? Or they can become angry and they may not trust you after that, right? And then there's rebellion, of course, right? And we see that in teenagers all the time, perhaps more so than any other time, isn't it? Yeah? And of course, we have the gadgets and social media now, particularly after COVID, yeah, which completely takes over. So they withdraw into their shell, and the more we expect things out of them which they cannot do and they cannot perform, the more they get into the other things. Like, I mean, the anxiety and fear often we are not even aware of. When children become anxious or they're scared of something, we hardly get to know about that. Of course, we know when they're rebelling, yeah, and we now know a lot more about how they withdraw themselves from the adult world, from the world of expectations to the world of gadgets and social media, isn't it? And that brings us to the lifestyle. And lifestyle is something, today's lifestyle, children's lifestyle has changed so dramatically in the last 10 to 20 years. It is literally eaten into their lives, into their times, into their minds. Yeah? And this has a huge impact on many things, right? It has an impact on their time management, their sleep, their nutrition, or their eating habits. It has an impact on their body image, yeah, all of that. So if you look at the impact of lifestyle on neurodevelopment, the way the brain develops, and there's ample evidence of this. So there's a lot of research that has gone on, yeah, and the research has happened in no doubt North America. So a large part of the research comes from Canada and US, and surprisingly, a lot of research comes from South Korea, yeah, because for them the digital world and how they're and Japan as well, because there's a huge crisis in the country about how children completely withdraw and just don't want to come out of their rooms, right? And that's why the research comes from that. And we know now, although the left-hand column, as you can see, that keeps changing, yeah, for children as they grow up, or even with time, some things come and go out of vogue. Like Facebook was a big thing. It's nothing now, but Instagram is big. So all those things change, but the impact on the neurodevelopment, that is there. And it's profound. So it can actually lead to difficulties in learning. It makes them seek instant gratification. It has addictive high levels of excitement. The attention span goes down. And all these things that you read here, it stunts language and social development. That are not, so they live in a virtual world, and many times we worry about their social skills and how that is developing, right? Yeah. And there is in fact neurodevelopment research where they have done brain scans in kids who do so many hours of screen compared to the ones who have not, and they have seen structural difference in the brains of kids who do, let's say, 8 to 10 hours of screen every day, right, as compared to somebody who does 2. And they have seen that the cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, the frontal cortex particularly, there is a thinning there. There is a thinning of what is called the corpus callosum, which is the connect between the right and the left hemisphere. So there are major changes that happen, structural changes. Now, whether the consequence or the cause of this is difficult to say, but indeed there are these correlations as well. So this brings us to another aspect of children's lives. So neurodevelopment and neurodifferences. And that's the other thing that we are concerned about often. So neurodifferences is about how every child is wired differently. So we believe that each child is wired and inspired differently. That's our motto. It's one of the things, it's a cornerstone of our work in Children First, right? And this concept about neurodivergence, how children are different, has taken some time to develop. And in the context of education and schooling, considering that schools started about a little more than 200, community schools. There were schools for privileged people, amongst the Raja Maharajas and the the nobility, there was always education, but for the common people, education started around 200 years ago during the Industrial Revolution, and from then onwards, there have been a lot of concern about children's capability to learn, right? So in the beginning, it was learners versus non-learners. So if somebody is not learning in school, in fact, even when I was in school, do you know, if in good schools, I supposedly went to a good school. My experience was not great, but the school was reputed in Delhi. And if you failed twice in a class, you were asked to leave. Yeah? How fair is that? Now, I mean, I don't know if it happens still. Perhaps it still happens, right? Yeah? So, this is a concept right from the beginning that if you're not being able to pass your classes, you might as well drop out. You're not capable of learning. Yeah? That's the thing. So learners versus non-learners, and then after some time, they realize that there are learners and there are some kids who may have a disability, and that came from a medical model, right? So they may have a learning disability and so on and so forth, right? So that, and this was, disability model came probably about 50, 70 years back, right? And after that, it became more specific. It became more politically correct, where they called some children neurotypical and the others non-neurotypical, which is that they are not normal, so to say. I mean, it's a polite way of saying that you're abnormal or not normal, right? You don't fit into the norm. And that brought about changes in the school structure. So from school being exclusive, meaning that if you can't learn, you leave, to if you can't learn, let's see what we can do, especially for you. So integrated school and inclusive school started from there, isn't it? And that is, again, has been what, not more than 50 years? 40, 50 years that we've gotten into the journey across the world. And we in India, I think, it's the last 20, 30 years that we have actually been in the process of developing integration and inclusion of children who learn differently, right? So it's been a movement of a kind. And in fact, one of the people who started the movement was a social worker called Judy Singer, who realized when her daughter was growing up that she was different. In fact, she had high functioning autism. She was diagnosed as having Asperger's, and she realized that her life is so different and so difficult. There were so many challenges that her daughter had to face which were unnecessary, which was because of the biases of the society, because of the inflexibility of society that her daughter suffered. And therefore the concept of neurodiversity came, right? It's about that we are all different. We all experience life differently, we respond to stress differently, we learn differently, yeah? And that's the thing that is now, hopefully, prevalent in most spaces. Although we still know that there are schools which will exclude children who are not learning typically or are not behaving in the way we are expected to do, right? And of course, alongside that, there was this concept of multiple intelligences. So again, the concept of IQ, how it came? It came about 150 years ago in France, when they were trying to figure that which are the children who can learn well in school and who can't. So they did this test and said that, if this is the cutoff, and if these kids are scoring so much, they can learn, and the ones who score below it, below that one number, they can't learn. Which again, in today's world, you can understand how flawed that concept is, right? The whole idea of IQ, that one number determining whether a child can learn, a person can learn or not learn, or what they will do in life, is very flawed now, we know that. And instead of IQ, or one score of intelligence, we now talk of multiple intelligences. So right till date, 8 different kinds of intelligences have been discovered, right? I mean, again, if you tested Sachin Tendulkar on an IQ assessment, he probably won't score very well. But he's a genius. Can anybody dispute that, right? He's an absolute genius, right? And similar to that, very successful politicians, perhaps not many will score very high on an IQ test, but they do so well in public life. So there are these many, understandings of different kind of intelligence and capabilities that have come about. And also, very importantly, understanding about learning styles as to what is it that helps you to learn better. And broadly speaking, there are 3 distinct varieties they talk about. One is the visual learner. Usually visual learners do well in a classroom because they can look at the board, look at the PPT and learn very quickly. Then there are auditory learners who learn when they listen, when they discuss and they debate. And sometimes if that is not happening in a classroom, then they may not be. They may get distracted and start looking outside the window and listen to the bird outside instead. Yeah? And then there are kinesthetic learners who learn when they do, when they move. And what do we expect children to do? We expect them not to move in a classroom. We want them to sit still, and that section of kids who learn only when they move, and I know of kids who, jump around, they're jumping on the sofa, somebody is doing a headstand, and when you talk to them at that time, or when they're watching something, they learn much better. Yeah? So in some schools, some progressive schools, they allow for things like fidgets. So they have things on the desk, and you can actually fidget with it. You can take a stress ball. Some of them, there are some schools in Delhi who allow a child to sit on the gym ball rather than the chair, so they can bounce and rock as they're looking at the board and interacting. And that's very innovative, and they learn much better when they do that, right? So those are things that also then started coming in now, and we know better about neurodivergence. And of course, there are many other concepts. I'm not going to go into the details of it. Some of you might have seen this poster. Yeah, you have, right? So our method of evaluation of if a child is learning or not, if they are picking up a skill or not, can also be very restricted, and it might not allow all children to perform well there. And that's the other thing that we need to be mindful of. Our whole system of how a child progresses in education, their pathway, which college do they get into, which competitive exam they crack, is all to do with pen and paper. And sometimes you wonder whether that is fair or not. Why sometimes? Yeah, all the time. Indeed, indeed. Yeah. So, and over on top of all this, we had COVID. My God. What all have we been through in this time, in the last 2 to 3 years, and we are not still out of it. And how many of you think that it has affected children's growth and development? Yeah, mental health, their ability to learn. Yeah, we have seen that deep impact of it. And the scary part is that we haven't seen all of what happens when we go through such traumatic phases. We carry the trauma with us. Like, for instance, the trauma of partition is something that we still carry. And people still get affected by it in different ways. It alters their behavior, it alters their perception, it alters the way they look at another fellow human being. It does, doesn't it, right? And that's how COVID might also unfold in years to come, right? So yeah, all this happened. COVID is like a huge natural disaster which just did not stop. Other natural disasters like a tsunami or an earthquake, it happens and it goes. And then we are left to clear, and deal with the aftermath. We know that, okay, and sometimes you have an aftershock when you have an earthquake a few hours later, but then it's done and dusted and we are there to pick up the pieces, build lives again and all that. But in COVID, every time we lifted our head, it came and knocked us down. And that impact, that trauma, the psychological trauma, is very deep indeed for many people. So, of course, I'm again not going to go into what all happened. We have looked at it very, very closely and worked with communities. We opened up online services which were free for kids who were stuck across the country. We were talking to them, we were giving them therapies because they did not have any access, they could not come back home. And these were kids in hostels who had just taken up a job, who were in their early 20s or late teens, and we were working with them constantly through that time. So, when we have a mixture of these three things, the expectation, the wiring, and the context being our lifestyle, all the the gadgets and the changes, and of course the impact of COVID, many children might go through a lot of struggle as a result of all these three things. And what is then the impact of it? What is the impact of this kind of struggle? So even before COVID, WHO, in a multi-centered study, right, in 2015, which included India, multi-country study, so it was a vast global study they did, and they figured that 20% of children and adolescents, more so adolescents, have a mental health condition which can be diagnosed, 20%, mind you, right? And they predicted that by 2020, it's going to rise by another 50%. Of course, COVID came, and actually made it much worse. In fact, during COVID times, WHO again went out to different countries to check out the mental health, and they found that in the youth, ranging from 15 to 25, there was a 5-fold increase in mental health symptoms, yeah, including depression, symptoms of depression, anxiety, substance misuse, self-harm, which they were doing, and suicidal thoughts. There was a 5-fold increase in that, right? And as I said, we are probably going to wait and see how this unfolds over generations to come. 25% children would have suffered at least one episode of clinical depression, not being sad and disappointed, right? Of having the illness called depression by the time they're 18 years old. One in 4. That's how high it is, right? And when they actually, again, WHO did a multi-country study in college students, they found that 1/3, 35% were depressed clinically. 35%. First year college students, yeah? So the numbers and the statistics is shocking, absolutely. And you might ask, why do we need, you're all educationists, you're people, who are custodians of our children's destiny, of their future. You are the people who will, shape the world through our children. And why should we then, if it's to do with education, talk about mental health? Is the question. Do you see the relevance of it, right? So again, we believe and we have seen that mental health problems have a huge impact on education, intellectual development, emotional development, even physical health and social skills and relationships. Yeah. Some more statistics. 75% of mental health disorders start during youth. In fact, more than 50% start before teenage gets over. More than 50% of all mental health disorders, they start during teenage years. Yeah. And the number of suicides per day, by the way, I didn't mention that yet. It's 24 in a day in India, right? So India has, in the age range of 15 to 25, the highest suicide rates in the world. Yeah? And in fact, in other countries, if you look at the cause of death, the cause of death in young people across the world, suicide comes usually in number 3. So in some countries, it's number 2. So it's a third commonest cause for death in 15 to 25-year-olds. In India, it's number 1. It's the number 1 cause for deaths in the young. Suicide is, right? Those are the numbers that we're dealing with here. And look at the average number of years it takes for a child to get help. 10 years. They don't get help before that. And what might have happened to their growth and development and all of that during that time, right? And also to add to this, anyway, I'll come to that in a bit, right? So if you look at, again, in terms of population, so we are a country of 1.3, or now we are touching 1.4 billion, I think, right? Yeah. 41% of this population is below 20. 41%. That makes it 500 million at least. Even if you take a conservative estimate of 10% suffering from a mental disorder, it's 50 million kids who have a mental disorder. If you take 20%, as WHO says, it's 100 million. And that is about 4 times the size of Australia. Just the kids in India who suffer from a mental disorder. Can you imagine the magnitude of it? And that is one of the reasons why we believe that all of us need to collaborate. Because mental health experts are not going to crack it. They can't reach even the tip of the iceberg. Yeah? We have all of 7,000 psychiatrists in the country, out of which not many work with children. If you look at child psychiatrists, there'll probably be about 20 to 30 in India. Yeah. When we came back from UK, Lataji, in 2003, I was the first trained child psychiatrist in Delhi. Can you believe it? Right? And there was no training. There was no formal training in child psychiatry at all. Yeah. So we had to go to UK to be able to train and come back as child psychiatrists. Yeah. So, and now there are about 4 institutions, 4 or 5 perhaps, who do training, DMs and fellowships in child psychiatry. And each one of them has about roughly 2 seats. So every year we produce about 8 to 10 child psychiatrists. That's it. Yeah. So our work is cut out, and that's why I feel very invested in this, in meetings like this. I feel very motivated to come and talk to you all because you will make the difference. Yeah. A few of us mental health professionals are not going to cut it at all, right? Yeah. So, of course, you have a range of mental health disorders. Yeah, and as some of you are familiar with these terms, I'm showing all the Ds, the ADHD, BMD, PTSD, OCD, ODD, CD. Lot of labels, isn't it? Yeah. And perhaps, I mean, if you want to know about it, you can read about it. There are videos, there are TED Talks about many of these conditions and all of that. Also, heartening articles and TED Talks, etc., which tell you how people can do well despite having all this, right? And that's the silver lining. Yeah, actually, we believe that mental health disorders is something that doesn't disable you for life. You don't become a pariah. It can happen to any one of us. That's the message that we want to give. And all of us, sometimes or the other, or not all of us, most of us, let's say, will go through some mental health challenges. And that's all right, because, just like physical health problems, we'll get over these too, right? The question is, you don't need to know all this. This is for the psychiatrists and the psychologists. What you might want, oops, oh God, what is that? Right, sorry. That's some sound effect of my slide. I apologize. I tried my level best to get rid of it. I could not. I'm techno-disabled. Besides other disabilities, I have techno-disability. Yeah, so, what are you likely to see? And that is the question. So, and do you see some of this? School refusal, inattention, distractibility, deteriorating academic, extracurricular performance, low self-esteem, poor self-worth, shyness, withdrawal, opposition, aggressive behaviors, anger outbursts, antisocial behavior. Do you see any of this in your children? Yes. Right. So these are markers of mental health, right? So usually when mood swings, conflicts, fights, difficulty in relationships, substance misuse, when you have a kid who is oppositional or who's throwing a tantrum or particularly showing antisocial behaviors, usually what do? The child either gets suspended or expelled, isn't it? Yeah? No, they don't? Yeah, not anymore. I'm so glad I'm in your company. I'm glad that you're able to do that, but traditionally and even now, in most cases, if a child, let's say, gets a vape or you catch a young person of 16 with cannabis in their bags, what is the response of school? Generally speaking, there would be a suspension to start with. In most schools, I would say. And if you don't do that, kudos to you. Fantastic. You don't do that. Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant, right? But if you see any of this, it's important to remember that this child, particularly if there has been a change in behaviors or moods or the way they relate to people, then there could be a possibility of a mental health problem. And look at it from that lens, and not a lens of discipline or right or wrong, yeah? Because the child may be within themselves suffering, yeah? So again, I'm coming back and asking the same question, just to get your viewpoints, right? So what do you think mental health problems impact? If they have a mental health problem, what all do they impact? Yeah, relationships, learning, it definitely affects education. There's no question about that, right? And that's what I wanted to highlight, besides many other things. It impacts growth and development. So even something like depression or anxiety, and if it lasts in a child's life for, let's say, 2 to 3 years, it leaves a deep impact in the way they grow as a human being. And even as an adult, they will carry those experiences with them. It will shape the way they view the world. It will shape the way they view themselves. Many kids who go through difficult emotional stages or phases will carry it with them. And that's also very important to remember. It's not going to completely go away unless we identify it fairly early and help the child, and the child feels supported through it. Then the story is very different. Yeah? Then they might actually grow up believing in the world, trusting people around them. Yeah? So yeah, health, nutrition, safety we talked about, self-harm, suicide, but also a heightened risk of exploitation and abuse. Kids with mental health problems are easy targets of bullies, of other exploiters in the net, people who abuse kids. A lot of the kids already have an existing mental health problem, right? Peer difficulties, profound impact on families. Families can go through hell when kids go through their mental health problems, and particularly if it is not identified and dealt with early enough, and they don't have the support from their community, from extended family, from the larger community, including schools. Yeah. So, how important is then mental health? And I'll leave you with these questions, right? Does mental health problems in our kids worry you? Do they worry you? Yeah. Is it connected to education and other aspects of development? I mean, yeah. What can you do about it? What can you do about it? That's the other question I'll leave you with. I mean, you'll find your own answers. Yeah. I mean, it's not easy to find answers to all these questions. Some of them are very complex. A lot of it is to do with not just that one individual, but the systemic, the systems that they grow up in, and it could be to do with family, it could be to do with loss, it could be to do with COVID, it could be to do with a learning disability, it could be so many different things. So it's not easy to find answers, but the question is, are you willing to? What do you want to do about it? Are you willing to do something about it? That's a big question, isn't it? And it requires mind space, it requires investment, it requires resources, energy, yeah, of different kinds. And that is the question. I'm just leaving you with this question because it is a big question. And obviously schools are very busy, I know that. And many times when we, interact with schools and we go out there are so many teachers from the management side, they will say, but our hands are full. We have so much to do. When are we going to, push in this circle time that you're talking about? When are we going to find time to listen to kids and have conversations? Yeah? When we were talking about it, I don't know. When are we going to do that? That is a question that oftentimes educators will ask. And it's a very valid question. But then you need to figure that how will doing that impact the health and ultimately the education and the lives of the children that you want to send out in the world, feeling capable, feeling confident. That's what you want your children to do, right? Yeah. And how much is this going to impact it? So I'm going to quickly also then compare the two, mental health and what I believe most of you practice here, which is holistic education, which I think took roots in the mid-80s. And I think I forget something with R, the man's name was, who started holistic education. Does anybody know who it was? It came as a concept. And the concept really was, it's not a fixed ideology, but an open-ended attempt to embrace the complexity and wholeness of human life. Right? That's what holistic education is. It is concerned with the development of every person's intellectual, emotional, social, physical, artistic, creative, and spiritual potentials. So it's not just about getting a degree, it's not about going to the best college, it's a lot more than that. That's what holistic education is. And I'm sure that a lot of you practice good chunks of this. Yeah? Would you agree with that? Yeah? But look at mental health then. What is mental health? So WHO says it's mental and social well-being and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Right? State of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Can you see the overlap? Can you see how common they are? They are, yeah, they are almost the same thing, isn't it? So when we're talking about education, if there is good holistic education, a lot of mental health issues get taken care of in any case. They become preventative, and that's the whole point. So when education and mental health merge, you can do prevention and intervention together. That's what you can do. For instance, if you inclusive setup is where you say you embrace all children. They're all being class, and every child is different. And even the topper or the best student or the best behaved kid might sometimes go through a bad phase. They might become rude. They might start not wanting to come to school, and that's all right. If you are able to include it like that, then that is a different philosophy altogether. It is an attitudinal shift. And that actually then brings about changes in the structure and the functioning of the school, doesn't it? Yeah. And of course, you can do a lot of things about sensitizing your whole school, including right from the security guard to the management. Everybody needs to know about kids who sometimes might go through difficulties and how to handle that, how to deal with it, right? And then of course you can sensitize teachers. Like I said, there is a drop-down list of things to watch out for. Sometimes when children go through trauma or abuse, and you can see the signs. And if a teacher is sensitive, they're able to pick that up and say something not okay. So those are kind of things that you can sensitize your teachers with. You can look at a networking and referral system in wherever you are, and look at competent professionals who have similar views, who are willing to work with you together, right? And of course, we call it building a community of concern for our children. Schools are best place, I think. You can build communities with the parents, with doing projects outside, in the immediate vicinity, and that builds a goodwill and a vibe or a sense of being together in this, And when you build that community, then if you focus on children's needs there, safe parks, for instance. Can they go to a park and play without parents hovering around them anymore? They can't anymore, right? So that's not a safe space anymore, right? Is the school toilet a safe space for all children? Those are questions that we have to then ask. That how do we make it safe? Those are different kind of questions that one can ask about. What will keep our children safe? And so that's the community of concern for children. Thinking about children, keeping them in the mindset. When it started happening now, much more than before. But when you would walk into a toilet, in a male toilet, there are urinals, right? And till about 5-10 years ago, if you walked in, there would be nothing for children. All of them would be at a height where kids can't use it. How insensitive to children is that? Simple things like that, yeah? But it's important to keep them in your mind, to think that what is the kid going to do when he enters the space, right? Yeah? And okay, yeah, so there's so many different things, including what kind of internet stuff they are getting exposed to. That's another big thing. What is coming on TV in the middle of the day? When the parents are working, children have come back from school, and they switch on the TV, and some of the stuff that's coming at them is so inappropriate. It's not okay, isn't it? Yeah. All those things then we need to then talk about, right? So yeah, prevention and intervention. I do believe that schools have a big role to play, and it's like piggybacking on you all with your, with your resources, with your good intentions, with the fact that you have gathered here to talk about your children. So you are schools, you will think about children, you will give it, but not many other people will do that, right? So we hope that schools will be able to take on that role, yeah? So a collaborative approach is, again I said, it's a step-by-step process. You don't have to jump into it, right? This collaborative approach to look at resources in the community. Who will you work with? It could be, again, it could be mental health professionals, but equally it could be NGOs who work in this space. It could be other schools who are doing similar kind of work, right? It could be some people who are into sports or artists who can actually engage, who can come into your school, and those spaces also become preventative. So there are many things that one can think about when you think about a collaborative approach and a systemic perspective. And by that I mean, when you have a child going through a problem, it's not just their problem. You can see that there are circles of influence, right? So there's the immediate family, there are peers and friends, there's school, there's the larger community, there's something happening even politically in the country which might be impacting them. There can be anything that could be impacting a child. And we have to look at it like that. And if we are able to see it in a systemic way, then not just the child, but everybody benefits from it, Other children do, we do as adults even, yeah? And yeah, so that's the other thing that, so building our own ecosystem, it seems daunting at first, but eventually it's a win-win. Eventually it's a win-win. If you look at mental health, right? One step at a time, be aware of your readiness. What are you ready for? What are the resources you have? What are the kind of mind space that you have? All that, yeah? And celebrate the success stories of kids who have had their challenges. It's a big deal. It makes so much of a difference. It also makes other kids sensitive to kids who might be having difficulties. When they see that they can succeed, they can do something which is worthwhile, So yeah, it's like this. It's an ecological systemic model where the child is at the center. We have school, family, community, and mental health services, around them, and we can build on it in the way we want to. I'm going to end with a little story. And the story is about this young man, an upstart in a village where there used to be a wise old man. And this wise old man would sit under the banyan, and people would come from far, from other villages, to ask his advice. And this upstart would think, what's special about him? He just says such simple things. I'm going to prove him wrong. I'll do something which will make it apparent that he doesn't know everything. So he caught a butterfly, and he put it in his hand like this, and do you know that story? Sudha ma'am does, it seems. Anyway, so he took it to the wise old man and said, I have a butterfly in my hands. Is it dead or alive? And he thought that whatever he says, if he says it's alive, he just do this and and it'll be a dead butterfly, and if he says dead, he'll let it go. And so the old man said, my young man, it is in your hands. Yeah? It is in your hands. Get out of life. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know whether I have any more time to take questions or do any interactions. I'll be happy to do that. But I'll leave it up to the organizers and, yeah?